to Practicing Mindfulness, our new name for Jewish meditation, chant, and study. So I've been really lucky to get back into a groove with my own Musar group, Musar being the practice of Jewish ethics. My own Musar group that I used to study with years ago and who I met up with again by happenstance. And we have started to study at the beginning. So I wanted to talk about that, a beginner's mind. Rabbi Megdal gave a beautiful sermon a few weeks ago, a few months ago, it's hard to remember now, and it was called A Beginner's Mind. And in her sermon, it might have been on the high holidays, she mentioned about starting things with a beginner's mind. She used the example of becoming a new dog owner and learning how little you know about something. And she talked about how Buddhism also uses this precept of approaching something with a beginner's mind, and that, when you are a new student in Buddhism and you would say to your teacher, I don't know what I'm doing, I can't do this correctly, I'm just a beginner. There's actually somewhat of a not a jealousy, but like a silver lining to being a beginner in Buddhist practice and meditation practice, because you want to have that wonder and that awe of entering it for the first time, that's not stale, and the humility of knowing that you don't know, knowing that you don't know so much. This in Judaism and Musar is called hit lamedut. Hit lamedut. It's the sort of the active, passively active quality of curiosity, of being curious. Hit lamedut. And it is one of the first steps in practicing Musar, is just to have the humility to be curious instead of being right, to be curious instead of knowing the answers, to be interested in the answers. So imagine if you were not a physicist, which I very much am not, and go into a physics conference, and knowing that at a physics conference where everyone knows that you're not a physicist, you're sort of allowed to ask whatever questions you want, right? Because no one's going to judge you for not knowing things because you're not a physicist. And so you can raise your hand as many times as you want and ask them, like, well, what is an atom again? And what's a vector? And like, what's gravity? And you explain gravity again, terminal velocity. Like, you could ask all these basic questions that if you were supposed to be an expert, you wouldn't be allowed to ask certain questions, right? Or you would feel silly or stupid for asking them. But the beginner's mind is like this way that we turn our mind on to being a beginner, even in an area where we feel like we ought to know more, but we know that we're never going to really be an expert in almost anything. So it's about cultivating an attitude of curiosity and wonder, even in areas of our lives that we sort of are established in, so that we can also develop curiosity and wonder in things that are uncomfortable as well. So we have the example of when we're knowledgeable, when we're intelligent, we feel like we're learned and we're full of answers. Like when we're a teacher in front of a classroom, like we have to know all the answers or something. But when we're curious, like a child, we're unsure. We ask more questions and assume we probably don't know all, if any, of the answers to the questions that we have. And that, of course, leads us to the difficulty of being in a relationship when we perceive ourselves as sort of like fixed in our answers to things or in our knowledge of things, instead of being curious about somebody else's perspective, or curious about how things work, to not assume that we know how things work. So this is all under the umbrella term of the beginner's mind, So beginner's mind, we're going to sit with this just for a second, and then we'll come to one more text from Rabbi Yochanan. But wanted to sit with this for a second. We'll do one more nigun. It's coming into a silent and guided meditation. So for this one, I'll do Daryl's nigun in memory of Daryl Sherman, who was at the meditation in which I wrote this nigun. And as we sing this Nigum, just start to think about being a beginner. And Daryl was a teacher. He loved to teach his students. He loved the wonder that they came to the classroom with. So our beginner's mind, come back into the beginning of this meditation season together. All focused on being beginners. focus is to be okay with the not knowing, with the not mastering. All the warts that make us beginners. Enjoy the sensation of the breath. Just try to empty your mind of the immediacy of anything. Need to control, count. One more minute, just back to the breath. return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to who you are, born and reborn again. Return again, return again, turn to the land of your soul. So part 2 here, what a beautiful quote from Rabbi Yochanan. This is from Talmud Eruvin. Rabbi Yochanan said, if the Torah had not been given, we could learn modesty from a cat, not stealing from ants, fidelity from a pigeon, and sexual morality from a rooster who appeases its partner before engaging in relations. When I first read this passage, I thought that it said we could not have learned. If the Torah had not been written, we could not have learned modesty from a cat, nor could we have learned not stealing from ants. We had to have the Torah. We had to have the Word of God to learn these things. But Rabbi Yochanan, his teaching is so powerful about humility that we can learn from these tiny species, these species which we perceive to have so much less neural capacity than we do. Some of the morality that we lack. Fidelity from a pigeon. he could have said fidelity from a penguin, from what I understand. Modesty from a cat. I love that. And it's just the idea that we think of others before we think of ourselves is part of this hit lamedut. It's part of this humility and curiosity, that we're curious about how others live, that we're curious about other people's experiences, that we're curious about what people's perspectives are and how they differ from ours, how somebody else walks through the world is as interesting, if not more interesting, to us than how we ourselves walk through the world. To try to understand somebody else's perspective is so important, as we know. We know that. But I love this idea of learning these traits and values from the animal kingdom. And those of you who are animal lovers, I'm sure, will appreciate that. And it takes us full circle back to Rabbi Magdal's teaching about having a beginner's mind when it comes to what else? Raising a puppy, raising any kind of animal, trying to understand how they think, trying to understand how they perceive the world. And we know that we have to, because there's sort of an opaque relationship with animals because of the lack of speech. And yet, because other human beings can speak to us, we sort of forget that they still have another perspective, that they still have another way of looking at things, that they're still trying to do their best, that we don't, sometimes we don't give people the benefit of the doubt, ironically, because they can speak, because we attribute more to them than we ought to, or we attribute our own perspective to them when we should attribute their perspective to them, not the one that we put on them. So in any case, I love this quote by Rabbi Yochanan, going along with curiosity and a beginner's mind. So, play a little bit of the beginning nigun as we go into silent meditation number 2, focusing on learning from the animal kingdom, learning traits from all of those around us, right? So it obviously isn't just the animal kingdom, but it's learning from every human being we come in contact with, which is another Jewish teaching, how we learn from others. So this is Oseh Shalom Nigun from our meditation group. this meditation, I'm going to imagine a cat. And I'm going to think of my mother's deceased cat, Lyle. Who showed patience and humility and kindness to my children. Maybe you want to think of an ant. A penguin, a rooster. notice myself drifting, so I'm coming back to the cat. Shema Yisrael, Well, thank you for joining me so much on this virtual version of Jewish meditation. Hopefully, we'll be back together and with a good community. People in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from today, which I'm not getting the date in my head. I think it's the 7th plus 14 days is 21st. That makes sense. Monday the 21st, which will be the Monday night before Tuesday Interfaith Thanksgiving, which is always a lovely way to bring in Thanksgiving. So I can't believe it's already Thanksgiving in 2 weeks. So thanks for being here with me and practicing Beginner's Mind. And look forward to seeing you all soon. Have a great night.